Now, my record at pronouncing difficult names is not particularly good. It's pretty poor, actually. So I'm opening myself up for all kinds of punishment because I'm about to review a phono amplifier from Chord Electronics. Here's what the name says underneath, and I will display that now. And I'm going to say it's pronounced Huei with an explanation of to add a bit of a hua accent. I think it's Huei. I tried to confirm this with Chord, the company, before I started this video, but they were all on a big coffee break and no one answered my calls. Where were you, Chord? Anyway, I think you pronounce this Huei, and I can't stop saying the word, have you noticed? Let's get on with the review. This is a phono amplifier. It's called a Huei and it costs £990, which is way cheaper than some phono amplifiers, but it's also way more expensive too than some budgets. It's sort of in the middle. The Huei is beautifully packaged for this price point, contained in a slip case. The flip top box features a concealed magnetic catch to reveal the chassis, and a separate drawer is available for the switch mode power supply. It's all rather swish. The Huei itself continues the aesthetic delights. It's well built, solid in the hand, relatively small at 41mm by 160 by 72mm, and weighs a rather dense and supremely confident 657 grams. Just holding the Huei, you are infused with a sense of customer confidence. There is a sense of rightness about this phono amplifier. Again, this feeling is a testament to the build quality of the Huei. On the rear, if you look at the rear, on the far left hand side is the power switch. This is a rocker switch, which I thought was a bit small. I also thought it was a little bit too close to the other sockets on the rear. A little irritation, but not a big deal. Single-ended outs sit adjacent to single-ended inputs, and a pair of balanced outs completes the line. A grounding post is situated above. Now on the rear, I will show you a stock photo from the company itself. And now I will show you an image of the rear of the review sample I actually had in my possession. Notice there's a sort of chromed plate fixed to the rear. This addition is a useful one because it lowers the noise floor. So if you grab yourself a Huei and you haven't got one of these plates, give Chord a ring. On the upper front are buttons for impedance, gain, moving magnet and moving coil, and there's a rumble filter here as well. Now there's a sort of dense solidity about the Huei, and that's great, but just be careful if you do connect thick, heavy, weighty cables to the rear, because the actual unit itself might not sit securely to your shelf. The cables might want to pick it up and throw it about a bit in a sort of King Kong Fei Ray kind of relationship. So if you do use rather more substantial cables, it might be an idea to secure the Huei to your shelf with some blue tack or something of a similar ilk. Selecting moving magnet or moving coil, gain or impedance means pressing the labelled button or relevant coloured plastic marble ball thingy on the upper front of the chassis. So you have to press and hold the button until it glows red for moving magnet or blue for moving coil. There are 12 options for moving coil impedance values available here, from 100 ohms to 3700 ohms. Moving magnet offers the usual 47k ohms. For gain, there are 8 options, from 49 decibels to 76 decibels in moving coil mode, and 8 in moving magnet mode, and they range from 21 to 48 decibels. Having the wide variety of options is welcome indeed. It's nice to see a spread of impedance and gain options on a sub £1,000 phono amplifier. Now, one of the signature statements of any Chord Electronics product is the interface. It's these little coloured marble ball button things that they use to select, well, just about everything on their units. They're everywhere. I thought it was quite a cute little interface when I reviewed the company's Mojo headphone amplifier, for example. But when you've got a phono amplifier, it doesn't really cut it. I found the interface troublesome, problematic, shall we say. Now I can understand why Chord is using this interface, because it's there, because money has been spent on it, because it's been in development for an age, because developing a new interface for this Huei would probably increase the price, because you'd have to offset the development of the interface with the price of the final unit, and all that sort of economic stuff. Nevertheless, I don't really think the interface fits with this particular phono amplifier. For the Huei, selecting the gain and impedance values is tricky because each value is only associated to a specific colour, with no numeric explanation on the chassis. So, if you select a moving coil gain of 58 decibels, you don't simply move a chassis-based dial or switch to a stop that says 58 decibels. Oh no, you have to cycle through a rainbow of colours until you get to pink. Why pink? You tell me. Even so, you know that 58 decibels equals pink because the manual tells you so. Selecting 320 ohms of impedance means selecting purple. The manual tells you that too. There's nothing on the chassis to indicate the same, however. I question the use of this well-known Chord interface on a phono amplifier. If this interface is so good, why do I have to keep referring to the manual every time I want to flick a different setting? And why do I forget what each colour refers to 5 minutes later and I have to go back to the manual again? Let me put it another way. If you put a Huei in front of me without the manual, I would be completely and utterly lost. That's around £1,000 of phono amplifier that would be basically useless. Without the manual, you might as well bin the entire product. Now, does that say top-notch interface design to you? A top-notch interface is one you use without having to refer to a manual. Intuitive means clear and instant with no learning required. This interface is not intuitive. Of course, Chord will most probably disagree, but if this interface is so good, why does Chord provide a full manual explanation plus not one but 2 reference mini sticker guides to provide guidance on what buttons to press? Talk about belt and braces. That sticker information, by the way, is tiny and poor in terms of translation. The image you're seeing here is blown up to enable you to read it. I had to squint to read it, while the gain explanation is nothing but a rainbow coloured strip with no individual numeric values applied to each changing colour, and a vague looking table of ranged figures underneath. Then Chord has the effrontery in the small print at the bottom of this sticker to preach that you, quote, must ensure that you have the correct setting for your cartridge, unquote. If the stickers are any evidence, even Chord looks confused, especially when it tells you to look at the manual for the full gain figures. So what's the point of the sticker then? The mess generated by this interface is such that even the included manual can't make up its mind how to explain it. The impedance chart lists images of coloured buttons for each impedance value. And note how close some of those colours are. It's a recipe for confusion. It's worse in real life with imperfect lighting of a typical listening room. Even more confusing, the gain reverts to text descriptions only of each colour, with no image colour guidance at all, adding to the disorder. Also, with no image guidance at all, what happens if, for example, you're not sure of the exact difference between Chord's take on blue, green and cyan? The interface looks lovely in a moodily lit magazine advertisement, but I question its usability. The coloured marbles and changing colours idea is fine if you want to change a single variable, the volume control, for example, or even a power switch, which worked well on the company's Mojo headphone amplifier and DAC. It causes confusion for anything more complex though. But look, I can forgive an awful lot if the sound is excellent. So, is it? Let's find out. I began with an original pressing and title track from Roxy Music's Avalon. First impressions? Smooth. Very smooth, at least in mid-range terms. Accompanied by a low noise floor, the mids fairly glided through the soundstage without any evidence of real friction. I was impressed by the space and air that allowed the slightly shy ride cymbal to become more noticeable to the ear. The complex taps and splash rhythms from this area added a richness and depth to the track. Similarly, there was a host of percussive filigree that rode underneath this track. Apart from the principal drums, the secondary percussion fattened out the track and added intricacy to the arrangement. The combination of these percussive highlights could easily become blurred and lacking in definition, but the Huei inserted enough focus in and around the spacious soundstage to pick out each secondary percussive element, providing a busy enhancement to the main course. The ear could better place each instrument when there was less interference to tangle the output. This meant that the stereo image sounded relaxed and at ease with itself. There was no tension here. The band drifted through this track with no apparent effort. The lower noise helped to generate extended reverb tails, especially around the rhythm guitar and bongos, while before the female backing vocals joined in with the word Avalon around the chorus, the ladies added their own introductory low note that was easily recognised by the Huei and fully formed too. Bass meanwhile was tight and rather precise, but retained its organic character, propelling the music forward. Even Edie Gourmet's Just One of Those Things, on the Harmony release of the album With All My Heart, a rather compressed master, exhibiting her jazz vocal in front of a full orchestra, was tamed enough here by the Huei, adding relief to the oft-heard bright upper mids. The background orchestra enjoyed a wealth of background space to roam. The brass section in particular soared, while the gourmet vocal crescendos were able to rise to the heights without me plugging my ears with cotton wool. Again, I was happy with the imagery here. Gourmet held a position other to the backing orchestra. Now the thing is, when you've got a jazz vocalist and they're singing with a massive orchestra, some phono amplifiers, they tend to place the singer almost in the middle of the orchestra, as if they're standing there, you know, with trumpets and saxophones around them. And that just feels and sounds a bit weird. So what the Huei does, it takes poor old Edie Gourmet out of that orchestra and places her away. So you feel there's that distance between the vocalist and the orchestra, and that's how it should be. So far so good then, in single-ended mode. So I then changed to balanced mode. Once up and running, the volume increased a tad, so I touched the gain downward a little. The sound was far more spacious now. More air was infused into the soundstage. Buckets of the stuff, actually. This meant that subtle effects from the Roxy Music vocals and instruments had a better chance of being caught by the air. Small, nuanced effects were now highlighted, or at least visible to the ear, adding a sense of delicacy and finesse to the final presentation. Vocals were smoother now. Other improvements centered on both the diction and clarity of the lead vocal and the transient performance from the percussion, which now responded to the strike in precise terms. Rhythm guitar and that ride cymbal now moved apart a little further, while the bass fattened itself to become more dominant but also naturalistic in tone. The entire track was now coated in a blanket of, how can I describe this? Atmosphere, I suppose. An emotional insight that was there before but not as keenly felt. The Edie Gourmet track also benefited, of course. The orchestra sounded grander, an impressive unit and one holding portent in terms of potential power. Gourmet's voice smoothed itself here, ranging in all directions with some ease. I have to admit that if I was giving the Huei a rating, I would have docked the rating by a single point because of the interface. It's a bit wishy-washy. It's not precise enough for a phono amplifier, and Chord really does need to look at that side of the design. Looks great in advertisements, not so good when you're actually using the darn thing. Now, despite me detailing the issues of the interface, I wouldn't damn this phono amplifier at all, actually. And the reason is, for many people, once they've set up the phono amplifier, that's it. You probably never touch the thing ever again. Or if you do, years will probably go by until you need to change your cartridge and change your phono amplifier to suit your new cartridge. So it's not something which you're going to be bothered with every single day. And because of that, while the interface is irritating, yes, is it a major factor in the review? Probably not. As I say, because it's used so very little. So in that case, the interface itself, or the use of the interface, will be really quite a rare event. As such, I was very happy with the Huei. The smooth nature of the mids and the low noise output from the single-ended connections was only further enhanced through the balanced ports. If you can, listen to the Huei through balanced outputs for the best performance, but both are highly recommended. Well made and solid to use, the Chord Huei Phono Amplifier is a smooth operator. And that's me done. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. Don't forget to check the description below. There's a list of reference kit that I used during this review if you want to check out what equipment I used to do the review. That's down there, along with a whole host of other links for social media that I'm on. My Facebook group is there, my Patreon page is there, and on Patreon I have a host of editorial that you can't find anywhere else. It's exclusive to Patreon. There's also a bunch of other editorial you'll find on my website, and there's a link down there for that too. If you want to learn more about the video wall behind me, you're welcome to ask. If you're thinking, what's that vinyl, and you can't quite see the title, then by all means you can ask me on that as well. I'm happy to share that with you. Until the next video, hopefully you can join me then. Bye bye for now.